All right, Algebra 2, welcome back, guys. We officially are now starting Chapter 5. So let's jump into Section 1 of Chapter 5. This is all about transformations, which you guys have already done. And in fact, I believe you've already done it twice. So like I told you through a lot of those Zooms or in class, transformations come back multiple times throughout this entire year, throughout the whole textbook. So this is just, once again, another time the transformations are coming up. And basically that just means that where are we moving this graph to? You know, is it going right, left, up, down? Are we making it wider, skinnier, stretching it, compressing it? That's what a transformation is. And now we're doing that with quadratic functions, okay? So basically, what is a quadratic function? Simple definition here. You're going to have a squared variable, or you could actually have a squared expression. All right, and then just a real quick difference here. If all you see is x squared, that's just a squared variable. But what would it look like to have a squared expression? It would be something like that. Okay, so both of these are still going to be in the quadratic function category because of that squared feature that they possess. But make sure that you don't get confused, that you have one is just a squared variable or term, and the other is a squared expression because it's a whole thing wrapped up in parentheses. All right. Now the next thing is, what shape are they making? They're making a parabola, which basically is a smiley face. If it's a positive parabola, opening up, or they could be making a frown looking face here, which would be a negative parabola opening down. Okay, so let's keep moving into our notes, and let's see. This is just a little thing here. Just review those past sections. All right, we have covered all of this, and I will tell you that the section in the book here, it still does a great job about covering all of the different things that occur that you've already learned, as far as a horizontal translation, a vertical translation, or you could have a horizontal stretch or compression, or a vertical stretch or compression. You could also have a reflection. That's like a full flipping of the graph. Okay, all of that we've covered. So if you still remember it, this is going to be an easy section. If you don't, then take a look at the next note we have here. There are 4 charts in this section that really will be helpful for you to copy down. If you forgot anything, copy down those charts, because when it comes time for either a quiz or a test, those will be really helpful to have in your notes. All right, and one of the last pieces here, this is what the vertex form looks like. And we have done this, but this we haven't worked with quite as much as we have with all the translations. So this is the vertex form, which does look a little bit different here. I'm going to move that just a little bit. All right. And the only reason is I don't think you could see where that squared was. So make sure that you still notice there is a square right there. So we're going to talk you through the basics. A, what is that doing? If you do anything with A, that is going to either affect a reflection across the X. That could also, by the way, it needs to be a negative. If A is a negative, there's going to be that reflection. Or if A is just a regular whole number or a fraction, that's going to determine whether it's a vertical stretch or a vertical compression. When we mess with H, you will notice that is in the parentheses, only affecting X. That's when a horizontal translation shows up. When you mess with K, notice that that is out of the parentheses, and that would be a vertical translation going up or down. Okay? All right, so let's move into the first example problem here, which I'm going to want you guys to use your graphing calculators. I want to make sure that you are confident in using your graphing calculators. Okay, so you're going to want to make sure, go in y equals, clear out anything for y equals, and also do a double check that your plot 1, plot 2, and plot 3 are not highlighted. Okay, and another double check, this is always before you're graphing, is go into your window and make sure that you do have a proper breakdown in your window. And usually what I'm going to use here for my x minimum is a -15, my x maximum is a +15, your x scale is 1, Your y minimum is a negative 15. Your y maximum is a positive 15. And then, again, your y scale is a 1. If you have all that, everything's checked off, we're good. Go back into your y equals and plug in this exact equation. Something to also remember is that that negative sign that is in front of the x value, so we're talking about that guy right there, that's not a minus sign, that's a negative sign. If you push minus and then x and everything else, you're going to get a syntax error. So that's not good. So the negative button is what's right next to your enter button. All right, so you're going to hit negative, then you have x, then we're going to have squared plus 6x minus 8, hit graph. All right, there we go. And you should see there are a few things happening here. One, we have a negative parabola. It's a frown going down. And how do we know that? Before we even graph it, you should already know that because of that negative sign that's in front of the x squared. Okay, so if there is a negative x squared, then that's going to be a downward parabola. If it's a positive, then you know you're having that upward shape positive smiley face parabola. But we have a negative, okay? And then what do? We are moving it to the right and slightly up. So what you should see on your graph here, when you plug it into your calculator, let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like it's right about there. Right there. Okay, from the looks of it here, for me, it looks roughly like that. Okay, so if you're getting a graph on your graphing calculator that's basically that, then you are good. You are getting the proper graph. Okay, now if you wanted to be very precise with it, I will teach you a little bit later on in this chapter how to get that perfect exact zeros, or in other words, your roots. Okay. We will also be doing a lot more factoring in this chapter, but this first section is basically all about graphs and translation, moving those graphs around. Okay, so there you go for number 1. Let's go in. And number 2, this is all about just describing the transformation. So I'm not making you graph these. We just got to talk it through and basically say what is happening here. All right, you see an x squared, so we know that it is a quadratic. And you notice that minus 5 is by itself. It's not in parentheses with the x. So that would mean that we are looking at the k value. So that's just the vertical translation that it is affecting. So this would be down 5. That's it. Okay. So when we're talking about the translation down 5 or down 5 units, I know the book likes to make sure to say something specific about what's happening here, 5 units. Okay. So let's take a look at part B for number 2. There's 2 things that you should notice. One thing you should notice is that minus 2 on the outside of the parentheses. So that minus 2 is going to tell us that we go down 2 units. Then you should notice inside the parentheses, right next to x, there's another number here. If it's in the parentheses next to x, that's going to be a horizontal translation. But you remember, in the past, we learned that you're actually doing the opposite of what the problem says. The problem says plus 3, but you will then actually translate that to say you go left 3. Okay, so this tells me left 3 units. Okay, so that would be the full description for part B. We go down 2, left 3. That's everything we need there. Okay, perfect. All right, let's do number 3, part A. Describe this and graph this. All right, again, if you want, let's use the calculator. Go back into y equals, clear out that y1 if there's something still there, and don't forget your parentheses. All right, if they're given in the problem, you need to put them into your graph. So go parentheses, 2x, close the parentheses, then hit the squared button, and then graph it. All right, so what you're going to notice is, yes, this still is going up. It's a positive parabola. Yes, it is still going through the origin, but we did something to how wide or skinny this is. Okay, so you should be noticing that we really have basically a horizontal compression. Now let's look up. And why do we know that? Because if we look at, let's see, there should be one more variable right next to x. That variable right there would basically be telling us, what are we doing horizontal-wise? If it's connected to x, like that 2 is, that is telling us whether we have a horizontal compression or a horizontal stretch. And if you look at that chart on page 317, anything right there connected to x, remember you have to flip it, right? This is the kind where it actually is a flip, so that 2 is flipped and tells me that we have a horizontal compression factor of 1/2. Okay, and again, you are looking at that chart that's on the same page 317, because when it's connected to x, in other words, inside the parentheses connected to x, you have to flip it. Now let's graph it. That's the last piece that we have to do here. So we know it goes through the origin, and we know it is making a positive parabola, but it's skinnier. All right. So it's going to look roughly like that. When you graph this on your graphing calculator, you should see a skinny positive parabola. All right, let's take a look at B, and this is our last example problem. You'll notice no parentheses. The fact that we have no parentheses means that we're not doing a horizontal, but we are doing a vertical, okay? And so if we plug this into the graphing calculator, in fact, before you even plug it in, notice that negative 1/2. So what's that negative going to do? It's going to make it go upside down, a frown face, a downward facing parabola, okay, opening downward. All right, so when we plug this in, you don't need parentheses. I mean, if you want to put parentheses around the fraction, you could do that, all right? Or you could just put it as a 0.5. You could also do that. All right, so we could go negative 0.5, then x, then squared. That's still going to give us the same graph. Hit graph. There we go. It is a downward parabola, opening downward, got that frown face, but this is a vertical compression by a factor of 1/2. So that's what we would describe it as. This is a vertical compression by factor of 1/2. So that's part of your answer. You got to describe it. Now we have to graph it. And the graph here, we know again it goes through the origin, but this looks a little bit wider than our normal parabola would be, a little bit wider. Okay. All right, so that covers section 1. We're going to utilize the graphing calculator, make sure we're comfortable with that, and go back and review all that info about translations, because it's coming back. You got to make sure you know it. If you don't, take the time to copy those charts from section 1 into your notes. All right, good. We'll see you guys in the next one.